Hello students, I am Ishwar, your polity mentor we all know polity is very important for your exams, for your prelims and mains. So for your convenience, we have divided the topics into micro topics. We all know that British have ruled us from more than 250 years. Then the question is, how did they do it? How did they rule us? Okay, for example, you are the owner of a company. You have a software company or a hotel or a business. How do you regulate your employees? How do you control the business? You control through certain rules and regulations, right? Similarly, Britishers to control India have passed regulations over a period of time. So in this chapter, we'll discuss about the acts passed by the company from 1773 to 1784. Okay, how did the Britishers come into India? They came as traders because there was a lot of demand for spices in the Europe. And then they came in the year 1600. They came to Jahangir and then asked permission from Jahangir, and Jahangir gave them permission to establish factory at Surat and Kolkata. So that's how they started as traders. And then the British Crown gave the exclusive rights to trade in India under the charter of Queen Elizabeth. What does it mean? For example, you are starting a company. You need permission to start the company, right? So that is how the Queen gave them exclusive trading rights. Exclusive. They are the one and only company. That is monopoly. So apart from East India Company, no other company is allowed into the India. Okay, let's see here. This is a battle, right? Britishers are fighting against native Indians. So this is Battle of Buxar. It was fought in the year 1764 after Battle of Plassey. When was Battle of Plassey fought? In 1757. Battle of Buxar was fought in 1764 on October 22nd, on 23rd on a rainy day. Okay. It was fought against British versus three armies. You can see here. Mir Qasim, who is he? He is the Nawab of Bengal. And Nawab of Awadh, Shuja-ud-Dawla, and Mughal Emperor Shah Alam. Where is Awadh? Let us say this is India map. Here there is Bengal. This is Awadh. This is the Mughal territory. Okay. So British fought against these three forces, and these British fought with a group of 10,000 people, whereas the three armies had around 40,000 people. 10k versus 40k. So logically the 40,000 people should win, but the British won because they were good at using weapons. And it rained on that day. British, coming from a cold country, they know how to preserve the gunpowder in a cold climate, whereas Mughals from a tropical country were unaware or do not have the knowledge to protect their weapons. So they failed. And then plus cheating also happened. So with this war, they won the territories of Bengal, Bihar and Awadh. After they won it, they got the Diwani rights. What are Diwani rights? Diwani rights are rights over revenue. Matlab, paisa, money. They got rights over revenue and civil justice. So with this of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, these three regions, Britishers used to collect revenue and provide civil justice. How did they get it? They got through 1765 Diwani rights. Okay. And after that, in 1857, what happened? Sipahi mutiny, and then the Crown rule started. From here, the East India Company rule ended and the British Crown started to rule. And then, as we know, it was suggested by M.N. Roy to have a Constituent Assembly for India in 1934. And then we had a Constituent Assembly in 1946. And finally, on January 26, 1950, Constitution came into force, and Indian Constitution and polity have their roots in British rule. Okay. Now let us look at some prelims based questions or MCQs for your exam. Which of the following act of British India designated the Governor General of Bengal? So what does this question say? It says, who was designated, which governors were designated as Governor General of Bengal? It is asking when was the governor made the Governor General. So options are Regulating Act 1773, Pitt's India Act 1784, Charter Act 1793, and Charter Act 1830? The answer is Regulating Act 1773. The reason was to regulate the affairs of East India Company. The Governor General of Bengal was made the Governor General, and let us say this is Mumbai or Bombay. This is Bengal, Madras. Bombay, Madras and Bengal, all these regions had governors. There is a governor here, there is a governor here, there is a governor here. So what they did was they gave this governor's powers to Bengal, Madras governor powers to Bengal, and they said the Governor General of Bengal will become the general here. So this is the answer. Which act they gave this power? This is Regulating Act 1773. Okay, let us have a look at the next question. Which of the following act led to the introduction of dual system of government in India? The question is, it is asking, when did the dual system of government start in India? Options are Pitt's India Act, Regulating Act 1773, Charter Act 1793, Charter Act 1813. The answer is Pitt's India Act. Why? Because Pitts was the PM of UK during that time. So he wanted to control the East India Company. To control East India Company, he split the government into two. There is Board of Control and Court of Directors. So it was started by Pitts, the PM of UK. Okay. In this chapter, we'll study the following acts. Regulating Act of 1773, Act of Settlement 1781, and Pitt's India Act 1784. Okay, let us start with the Regulating Act. Why do you need a regulator? In your home, your fans have regulator, right? What do you do with the regulator? You control the speed. Let us say you want high speed, you keep in 5. You want low speed, you can 1. Similarly, the British wanted to regulate the affairs of East India Company. Why should we regulate? Because East India was given monopoly rights, right? Once you are a monopoly, you will collect more money, right? And that company will become rich. But East India Company went into losses. So with this, the British government got confused. How come the company was making so much money, went into losses, but the employees became rich? The reason was employees involved in corruption. So to control the employees and to make the company rich, they passed this act of Regulating Act 1773. So what is the aim of this act? To control the East India Company and to recognize the political and administrative functions of East India Company, and it laid down the foundations of central administration. How did we lay down? Through Governor General, or by giving more powers to the Governor of Bengal, making him Governor General. Okay, the trick to remember this act is to regulate subordinate presidencies and stop private trade. Governor General was made supreme. So you have to remember this for your understanding the features of this act. Okay, the main features of this act. It made the Governor of Bengal as Governor General. Who was it? It was Warren Hastings. Warren Hastings, you have to remember for your prelims, Warren Hastings was the first Governor General of Bengal of India. Okay, plus it created an executive council. Governor plus executive council with 4 members. What is execution? When you execute a task, that is execution. To support and to execute activities, the executive council was started. It has 4 members. Okay, the next was the governors of Bombay, Madras presidencies were made subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal. Earlier, it was not the case. All 3 governors were independent. Now they had to report. Governor of Madras and Bombay had to report to Governor of Bombay, who became the Governor General. Okay, the next feature is it provided for the establishment of Supreme Court in 1774 with 1 CJI plus 3 judges. So total of 4 members. So Supreme Court was started. Why there is a need for Supreme Court? As I said, corruption increased. To try cases. So corruption has increased. To control the members of the company, they have started Supreme Court in 1774. And then it prohibited the employees or the servants of the company from engaging in any private business or accepting bribe. They are not supposed to accept bribe. They are not supposed to take or start any own business. Okay. It also strengthened the court of directors, right, to control the company. Okay. Then, okay, fine. They tried to regulate, but it failed. What were the defects of it? Let us look at it. In your minds, they might ask you, what are the defects of the regulating act? Critically estimate or critically analyze. 1. Governor General and Council, right? We said executive council with 4 members who started, but these executive councils who were sent were ignorant of Indian affairs, like Radcliffe. As I said, Radcliffe did not know India. He divided India based on police stations, right? Similarly, these guys are also were unaware of the Indian affairs. So how will they manage? They cannot regulate. So it failed. And then the eminent necessity of defining the governors of Bengal was made the Governor General, but the Madras and Bombay governors could not understand the reason for it, and there was a conflict. And then conflict between judiciary and executive. Yeah, who is the executive here? Executive is the East India Company, and judiciary, Supreme Court was started. There is a conflict. Why? Because the powers of the judiciary and executive were not defined exactly, and there was an ambiguity in that. Next is uncertainty. The framers of the act failed to lay down provisions dealing with the relationship between companies, court, and Supreme Court. The courts, the company has also certain courts to deal with the employees. At the same time, Supreme Court also dealt with employees. So 2 people are involved in one case. So it led to conflict, uncertainty. Who was the Chief Justice then? Chief Justice was Elijah. He was also a Britisher. Okay. Then Regulating Act could not achieve its aim and it failed. So what happens then? You correct your act. Act of Settlement 1781 was passed. It was called Act of Settlement. Why? To remove confusion or remove ambiguity and to support the lawful government. Which is the lawful government? East India Company is the lawful government here. And to maintain and protect the laws of the natives. That means for us Indians. So these 3 things were started with Act of Settlement. 1, to remove ambiguity, to support the lawful government of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, and to maintain, protect the laws and customs of the natives, that is us Indians. Okay, what are the features of this act? What does this act contain? The servants of the company, which earlier came within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, were now exempted from the jurisdiction. Supreme Court cannot try the servants of the company. Okay, and it has also reduced the limit of Supreme Court. How? Supreme Court is now only supposed to look after revenue matters. And the next one was, Supreme Court would not have jurisdiction on landlords. 1, it will not have jurisdiction on servants of the company, plus landlords and farmers, employees. Farmers, landlords, employees of the company are not supposed to try it under Supreme Court. So to remove ambiguity. Next, Doctrine of Separation of Powers was started from here. Okay. What is the article that deals with separation of powers, separation of judiciary from executive in our present constitution? It is Article 50. What is the trick to remember this? 50% of power it is Britannia 50-50, right? 50% of the power is jurisdiction with judges or courts, 50% with is executive or legislative. So Article 50 talks about separation of powers. That is how you remember. Okay. The next act. This act also failed. Why did the Act of Settlement fail in 1781? Because of you. Why you? Because of the civil servants. These civil servants Or like that present day you have exam like UPSC or IAS, you write the exam and you become an IAS officer. But that is not the case. Here, the court of directors are 4 people who select the IAS officer, not the IAS, the civil servants, the covenanted civil servants. If you go to a college, its college is called Halesbury in London. If you go to that college, you graduate, you become the civil servant. And these civil servants are nominated by this court of directors. So once you are nominated by a boss, you will be loyal to that boss. So civil servants are loyal to court of directors, and the laws passed by the British Parliament. Where are court of directors? Let us say this is India. Court of directors are here. Where is England? It is here. So to control, how can you control through act? You need loyal people, but loyalty is here. So the Act of Settlement and the Regulating Act failed. To correct this, the Prime Minister, he said he wanted to say who was the boss. Who is this guy? He is the Pitts. He is called Pitt the Young. His father also was a Prime Minister. He was the Pitt the Senior. He is Pitt the Junior. Okay. So he said, okay, let us establish a dual system of control. How? The British government and the East India Company both will rule in India. Okay. By which the company retained the control of commerce and day-to-day administration. So only commerce and day-to-day administration was given to the company. And the rest of the matters, what matters, political matters, were reserved to a secret committee of 3 directors, which is called Board of Control, and they will be in direct touch with the British government. This system was continued till 1858. So this was passed by Pitt. What did he introduce? Dual government. Okay, let us look at the features of the Act. It distinguished between commercial and political act functions. Earlier, East India Company, it had political plus commercial functions. It dealt with both. Okay, then what Pitts did? Pitts said no. Okay, let us have more control. So ECI, the East India Company, will look after commercial activities, whereas the Crown or the Parliament will look after political matters. So that is dual government. Okay, and the next feature was it allowed the court of directors manage the commercial affairs but created a new body called Board of Control. Okay, what is this Board of Control? It controlled the political affairs, thus it established the system of double government. Okay, it empowered the Board of Control to supervise and direct all the operations of civil and military. Political, civil and military. All these were given to Board of Control. Okay, and then revenues of the British possessions in India were also given to this special empowered committee that is called Board of Control. It controls the show. Okay, the next, what is the significance of this act? It called the British possession in India for the first time as British possessions. What to say? Let us say in India, British had Madras, Bengal, let us say this is Madras, Bombay, Punjab, Awadh. So these areas were independently British territories. But this one and Madras, Bombay, etc., all these territories were called British possessions for the first time. So they might ask you in prelims, remember this. And the next significance of this act is the second and the British government was given Supreme Court over the company affairs and its administration in India. Okay, it was given supreme control. Okay, what is the trick to remember all these things? There is a lot of things in the British India Act. How do you remember this? Who is this guy? He's Brad Pitt, right? And this guy is Boris Johnson, the the PM of UK. So Brad Pitt entered into politics. What is this Brad Pitt? B stands for Board of Control. Pitt is British India Act. Politics is dual politics. That is why you remember this one. Okay. Now let us have a look at the mains-based question. The Regulating Act of 1773, the Pitt India Act of 1784, left the East India Company as a mere shadow of its earlier political and economic power in India. Okay, you will get these kind of questions in your mains, but you should understand the trick how to handle it. You need to get more marks. So let us say start with introduction, body and conclusion. As I always say, prepare a sample or a 3 to 4 lines of introduction. Keep it handy, by heart it. Okay, let's understand the question. It is talking about Regulation Act of 1773 and it's talking about Pitt's India Act of 1784. Okay, there's two things, right? And it is saying these two acts left the East India Company as a mere shadow of what? Of its earlier political and economic power in India. That means East India Company was ripped out of its political and economic power in India. Okay, is it so? Yes. Start with writing Regulating Act was introduced in the year 1773 and Pitt's India Act was introduced to regulate the East India Company, and then mention Regulating Act 1, 2, 3, 4 points and Pitt's Act 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and then you finally conclude on agreeing with this statement. Okay, thank you students, thank you for listening. Let us meet in our next class.